This is Aaron Murakami with AMP Electronic Media and the Energy Science and Technology Conference. This is December 2nd, 2018. It's noon Pacific time. We have Eric Dollard on the call. We'll just go through a few announcements, and then if anything that Eric wants to cover, he can cover, and then we'll go ahead and open up for questions. First of all, I don't know if anybody was paying attention that I was doing a little bit of fundraising through Facebook. I don't know, it raised maybe about, almost $500 or so, because we're getting towards the end of the mortgage, and I just want to let everybody know that the building for EPD Labs, EPD Laboratories, Inc., which is a 501c3 nonprofit charitable corporation, has finally been officially paid off. And here in about 1 to 2 weeks, all the title and everything should be switched over to EPD Labs, and so that's definitely a huge step. And so for anybody out there who has contributed with donations or anything, definitely wouldn't have happened without you. So we just want to definitely recognize that. And so other than that, last conference in July for 2018, for the Energy Science and Technology Conference, Eric gave a 5-hour presentation on the history, theory, and practice of the electrical utility system, and he went into a lot of details of not only the history of it, but how the grid has been, little by little, methodically changed and degraded, and has made it more susceptible to EMPs and other kind of damage and that kind of thing. And if you have not had a chance to look at that presentation, I would highly recommend you get a copy. You can find the link at ericpdollard.com. If you search for utility, you'll find the link to that presentation, which is emediapress.com/ericdollard/utility, or you can go to emediapress.com, scroll down, and you can find it there as well. On the homepage of ericpdollard.com, that's Eric's official website. P stands for Paul, his middle name. So ericpdollard.com. There is a link in the main menu bar called Free Papers. And if you click on that, there is a report called NVE1, which is essentially the description of that presentation. And it kind of breaks down a 5-hour presentation into about, five or 6 pages or so. That gives an overview, and that's a free download there. I'd recommend everybody get a copy of that and share it around. And also, more recently, there was a, what was the second one, Eric, that was the follow-up to that? It was the electromagnetic boundary.
What I'm doing is what I typically do with these presentations is usually in the year that follows them, I write up each part of the presentation in much more theoretical detail. So that's the second report is the beginning of that process. So the chapter in my presentation called the electromagnetic boundary condition is being greatly expanded on, and I ended up with a few theoretical revelations out of that I found quite exciting. So now I've kind of got the scent. I'm really diving into this and a lot more about so-called electromagnetism and things that never have been completed with the Maxwell Heaviside or Hertz equations or whatever. And I'm rather proud of that effort because I managed to bring almost the entirety of electrical theory into a set of very simple and basic algebraic equations, and this has never been done prior to this point.
So that segment called Electromagnetic Boundary Conditions, also on ericpdollard.com, on the free papers link is the Electromagnetic Boundary Condition PDF, and you can download that as well. And we'd encourage you to download a copy of that and share that around. And then Robert Edmonds sent me, those are going to be the next ones going up. What's the title of that one going to be?
That's from the musical seismograph presentation. And what that is the Pythagorean basis for the musical scale. In other words, the numerological theory behind what we call music. So in that particular presentation, even though it sounds like it just relates to some little project or whatever, a musical seismograph, and the tradition of how I go about these things is every aspect of the subject was dealt with very thoroughly, from telephone engineering to sideband generation to amplifier design. And in the prior months, I had completed the Pythagorean analysis of the music, and which I found quite fascinating, and it made the music that I listened to sound a lot different. So I decided in the musical seismograph presentation to go ahead and dedicate a full hour to that, which put most people to sleep or made them go to the bathroom or whatever. But I got to do what I got to do, and if you can't understand one part of something, I've always told people, just skip over that and go to something you can. But I wanted to make that presentation thoroughly complete in all of its coordinates and dimensions, so there was no mysteries as to about what music is before we talk about what we're going to do with it.
Okay. So we're going to try to get that online on Eric's page here probably this week, probably around the same time we put a recording of this call here on YouTube, and we'll definitely email that out to the Eric Dollard mailing list and Energy Times.
I'd like to point out that actually that particular writing ties in more directly with the power of the ethers related to music electricity, and there's some diagrams that weren't complete yet for that presentation that ended up in the multiple coordinate system presentation. So it's still trying to make sure that all these things get together in one package so it's complete.
So anybody who hasn't seen that presentation, you can go to powerofether.com, and that's ether spelled AETHER, so powerofether.com, and that's the presentation Eric is referring to. So what's the latest updates with EPD Labs and the writing projects? And you've been doing a few interviews with Scott Hensler, and the most recent one he did, we haven't had time to announce that one yet, but that's going to be coming soon too.
Yeah, that was on the Integratron, which was a project that I found quite fascinating, and it basically took a bite in the same manner that all my projects do. So that was discussed, and how the so-called Landers facility developed out of that kind of historical thing, and then it kind of drifted off into other subjects, which then again landed back on this situation with the public utilities. And it's interesting that not long after I gave this most recent presentation with pictures of the burn downs and intimating that the power companies have just walked away from the whole power system and are just letting it rot, they don't care. They don't put money into that stuff anymore. They're not interested in paying linemen or what have you. They pulled them all out of town here. And not long afterwards, there was a Holocaust in California, and it turned out it was started by faulty power lines from a utility company, which oddly enough was the one that got me started at a very early age, in infancy, as a matter of fact. Pacific Gas and Electric was an excellent utility company, but as the internationalists and the oligarchs took over the utility companies, they left town. And I know from direct experience working with the emergency services, the sheriff's office, and the fire departments in the various counties that I operated in the occupied territories around San Francisco, that I would see something getting ready to do a burn down, or there would be a 12,000-volt line laying in the middle of the street, and the authorities would attempt to contact PG&E, and there was nobody at the other end of the line. So this is kind of what I've been complaining about, and where I'm here in Nevada right now, there's a number of situations getting ready to cause some rather massive wildland fires, and nobody wants to hear about it. And the question is what can anybody do about it? And the answer is nothing.
Okay. So the when you mentioned the Integratron, and there was a couple interviews that Scott Hensler did, the Integratron one, that was, which one was done back in April?
Well, there was 3 altogether. When I first met him, when he first introduced himself to me, we did one on rather general subjects, which I think, again, landed, square in the utility thing, which is, because that was this year's presentation, that's been, kind of what my mind's been working on all year. And then another one was done, which was descriptive of the musical seismograph project, what the basic elements involved were, and then we, looked at some equipment and went out to the outside of the mine and the lines and all that kind of stuff, and so it kind of gave an idea of what that project's about and what the end result would be for the subscriber. And then the radio interview that was done not too long ago, that, as you said, was on the basic theory and history of the Integratron, which, by the way, I'm the only one left that knows any of that.
Mm-hmm. So if anybody goes to ericpdollard.com and you click on the blog link, or you just scroll down on the page, any blog posts are sequentially there from the newest to the oldest. And so if you just scroll down, you'll see these videos. I think the one in April, that was the first one. That's on YouTube. And the seismograph one, I think that most of that was in your office. And so that one was early November. That's posted as well. And then he did a third one, more recent, and that's where you're going up to the shack at the top of the hill, kind of showing the little weather broadcaster, and that one will be posting probably this week too. There's a little bit of catching up to do, but in any case, if you go to ericpdollard.com, you can sign up for the mailing list, and that's where you'll get the notifications of when anything is posted on Eric's site, or any other updates or whatever. Are there any other updates you want to go over, or anything you want to cover before we open up for questions? Or
basically, what I'm going through now is a major shift, major life shift. So the complication is the amount of financial support for this endeavor has gone, in mathematics, what we call 1 over E. That's a numerical ratio, 36.8%. Or in English, it means there's not enough charge left in the battery to start the car. I can't afford to heat this place to stay in the winter. There's no money to make any further progress. The chunks of money required to get things going are usually large. So there's one antenna up and running. Unfortunately, it's only partially manned, and the operator was receiving medical attention for an injury during this earthquake episode. But the endeavor is it does work crudely. It was an emergency effort built adjacent to the San Andreas Fault with ground rods and field telephone wire and what have you. So the objective now is to get that on the Internet as fast as possible, and to get the signal out of this remote area and on the Internet will probably cost about $10,000. The A52E antenna is finished. The transmission line going into the microwave site that terminates it is fairly intact, but the gunheads did go shoot out a bunch of insulators. In order to get the lease and put the equipment in the microwave building and what have you, that's about $35,000. To complete a laboratory in the building, which is now owned by EPD Laboratories, would cost roughly $60,000. And none of this money is forthcoming, and I don't believe any of it will be forthcoming. And this has been going on for quite some time, so I'm basically going back to the Lone Pine mode, and we'll start the sequential writing. So what's on the website now is the beginning of that. The particular material, other than the power company-related stuff, the theoretical I was talking about, can be regarded as volume 3 of the Lone Pine writings. At this point, the English has not been written yet, but the mathematics is so basic that the English part is redundant for now. So anyone that has delved deeply into the Lone Pine writing books now has an application for it, and I believe this is the first time that the so-called Maxwell's equations have been reduced to basic algebra. No one has done this before. And to go with that and to mate with the history part of my last presentation, I have thus far in the past few months consumed about 2,000 pages of reference material, books by Max Planck, books by Heaviside, books by Hertz, books by J.J. Thomson, Larmor, and other numerous names to put this whole electrical thing in perspective and a finality. And what I've learned out of it is...
Okay, just a second. Let me mute that out.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
How amazingly malevolent and destructive modern physics is to the science of electricity, and that's why there is no science of electricity. And I was quite stunned to go through contemporary physics texts, seeing their view of the thing and how they've taken all the work of Steinmetz and Kennelly and Heaviside and Lord Kelvin and lessers like Edison and what have you, and taken all their works and erased it and put it all back the way it was before in the misguided 18th century mathematical physics. It's mind-blowing how these people have done this and have completely destroyed any possibility of understanding or even acknowledging the existence of electricity.
Okay. Now, some of this was in the Power of Ether as related music and electricity, where you started to kind of straighten out and bring continuity to some of the equations, for example, by J.J. Thomson as related to the ether physics. And is that kind of some of the beginning of this path of straightening that stuff out?
Yeah, that was a major breakthrough that I made in deciphering Thomson's work, which I wrote a full notebook on, which I think is on the air somewhere, I think for sale or whatever. It's all handwritten. And I used a little bit of that. I used the Thomson theory in describing how conductors work in the power system presentation. But the presentation that really lays the basis for the mathematical entanglement and setting the situation straight was the one called the extraluminal transmission systems of Alexanderson and Tesla, which is probably going to be worthy of another presentation at some point, because I spent so much time laying the theoretical groundwork, there wasn't a lot of time at the end of the presentation to discuss the actual methodologies used by these researchers and engineers. And then there was an article I wrote on the energetic form, which I think is in some kind of Lone Pine writings file that I called The Eagle Has Landed. And what it was the final disposal of the physics representation of electricity and the jettisoning of it into the deep ocean and laying a new understanding of electrical dimensions and how to apply them. That was kind of like a finale to the whole theoretical process, which I'm now undertaking again, because in the course of doing all these presentations and in filling these notebooks, about 1,000 pages of notes, I think about half of them you have scanned presently. I've come to a kind of grand realization, and now I'm starting to apply this to the power line type of situation, open wire transmission and what have you. And in the thing that just went on the website, the mathematical writings, it's actually quite remarkable that very little of what goes on in the power lines is electromagnetic. It's the discoveries that I'm making in pursuing this endeavor are quite exciting, and And now I'm trying to apply them to multiple wave reflections on long-distance transmission lines, which engineering-wise is supposed to be, well, there's no big deal about that. Well, it sure is a big deal when you try to do it. It doesn't work. I've had to go back to the raw theoretical basics. Like in the opening introduction in Max Planck's book, is when all else fails, you have two things to rely on and two things to rely on only. One is the law of conservation of energy, and the other one is the contiguous action of the ether. And that's all you got, and you have to work from there. So I've already have put a month's worth of work into the waste paper basket just to start all over again. Multiple reflections on a mismatched line almost defies analysis. I have an excellent reference library. I have the best authors on the subject, in this case, L.V. Bewley. There's nothing in his book that helps you figure this out, and the basic algebraic formulation that he gives for the simple one-shot reflection is wrong, and everything I got from the Amateur Radio's handbook all the way up to his masterpiece does not help at all. So this is it exhausted me, so I had to take a break from that particular effort for a while and get down to more basic things. But as far as multiple reflections on lines with definite impedances or shorts and open circuits, that's all worked out, and that package you'll be getting here in about a week. There's about another 40, 50 pages coming.
Okay.
So this is basically what I'm doing now. It's something I can do in the front seat of my car. It's a lot easier to keep the inside of the car warm than it is inside this building, because I can just park it in the sun. And so like I said, a rather lengthy writing episode is coming up here, and will probably constitute several hundred pages over the next year. And most of it will be orientated in the subject of my last presentation, power lines and electromagnetic induction and that type of stuff.
Anybody who's interested in that presentation, Eric mentioned the extraluminal transmission systems of Tesla and Alexanderson. It's at extraluminaltransmission.com. Going into the whole topic of the earthquakes, of course, there's not enough information to go on, but what's your feel on what this recent so-called earthquake was, where these ripples were picked up by seismographs all over the planet, but nobody even felt a tremor? Have you seen or experienced anything like that in the past?
Well, I mean, I don't have any instrumentation anymore at Landers. Mm-hmm. There was a variety of things that would appear on the charts, but thus far, of what few people I know, you seem to be the only one that even knows about this at all. I called my friend Ernst over there at NASA, who works with this scientist that has proven the whole electrical basis for earthquakes, who has just lost his laboratory. No one is interested in funding it. But he hadn't heard about it, and I don't have enough information of what it was, but I would imagine that it would have to be something very deep inside the Earth, so that there were no surface transverse waves. It was more of a strictly longitudinal thing, some kind of deep inside the Earth process, but I don't have enough information. If I had, like I said, I called the person that has the up-and-running telluric antenna, but he had severely injured himself, and he was undergoing medical attention during the process, and mm-hmm. We don't have the band-limiting filters and the peak limiters and stuff to make it possible to record this on digital recording. It's just basically this stuff refuses to be digitized, and it has to be done on analog instrumentation recorders, which you can't find anymore. And the only way to get around that is to start severely cutting down on the bandwidth and the rise times and those kind of things to get it digital.
Yeah, hi, Rand.
And that's what I just talked with him yesterday on that, and that's what we're looking at, probably about a $10,000 price tag to get a microwave link out of there and get the equipment. One thing I will point out is even though the situation here is basically bankrupt, all the equipment and facilities required for this project are here. So we got that far. There's between myself and Justin, there was roughly $250,000 worth of labor done, and through the donations and earnings and whatever is left out of my pension after the food and the gas and car repairs, $250,000 of capital was put into this. I would value the whole thing at about $5 million, and it disgusts me that there's no significant financial patron to carry this effort into any level of completion. The amount of money required is not really that big compared to things people waste money on. For example, this latest political flameout with this FBI female playing games with the judge, Dr. Fraud or whatever her name was, just received $650,000 in crowdfunding donations. What good did it do the world? This is where people want to put their money. That's why I'm declaring dead horse farms. There is no money for this. So the only thing left I can do is write. So at any rate, I got one hell of a library here, and I got an office and a desk, and 2,000 pages of graph paper and notebooks to fill up. So that's what I'm doing.
Okay. Recently something that's been causing a lot of buzz through the online communities is that there's this Tesla-looking Wardenclyffe-type tower down in Texas somewhere, and this group is talking about, they're doing it through the perspective of Zenyk Waves and that kind of thing. These are some ex-military people who have this company. I'm not going to mention the name of the company, but they do have a paper and a presentation that's downloadable through their website. I invited them to the conference, didn't hear back, but what it's looking like is it's probably best not to even have them present because it's, not looking like they're actually, portraying what their goal is according to what it's supposed to be. Can you give your opinion on who this Zenyk is and how he kind of fits into the history of, wireless transmission?
Okay, Zenyk, there was an interval of radio between the fall of Tesla and the rise of the Alexanderson system. So between 1905 and 1919, there was kind of a limbo of which way radio was going to go. Tesla's patents were trampled all over with various ways to circumvent how he would go about things. And what came out of this was a system that was employed by Rogers and a system employed by Fessenden and a couple of lesser-known names, which in my extraluminal presentation, I believe I got more deeply into who these other characters were. And where Tesla's transmission methodology was a longitudinal current within the Earth, the system that followed, mainly due to the errors of electrical wave theory that were introduced by Heinrich Hertz, they came up with another type of propagation called the surface wave. And it's a wave that is trapped into the boundary condition between the exterior of the Earth and the interior of the Earth. And this is the propagation mode that I use for my Earth receiving antennas, such as the one I constructed at Landers. Is that refractive boundary condition is where I separate the underground and overground waves. So these guys, by twisting Tesla's patents around, were developing this surface wave type of transmission, which essentially today all AM broadcast stations operate in this mode. They're not really very electromagnetic. They operate in a Tesla longitudinal earth current mode, and they operate in a surface wave mode because they're vertically polarized and they're very solidly grounded. So when Marconi came into the situation, then he munged up everything really bad, so bad, in matter of fact, that the government seized all of his stations and threw him out of the country. And the Assistant Secretary of the Navy, Franklin Delano Roosevelt, used that opportunity to make it illegal for anyone to do anything radio anymore. Few people know that was one of his first political moves, was to abolish radio, and the cops would come and take all your antennas and your equipment, and if you were caught with anything, you were in real trouble. RCA was formed to take control, and then Marconi came up with a new invention, ionospheric HF propagation, and RCA latched onto that, and then all these other modes of radio then became fairly well forgotten and buried. Now, the thing that you're talking about, there's a ham radio guy that I know who's presently under my instructions building each of the components for this cosmic induction generator form of electrical system for scientific study and the Tesla system for transmitting the Earth, which he is operating on the 160-meter ham band. He looked into it, and he regarded the structure that they're showing as a prop, and then pointed out to me that there's a couple of nefarious characters involved that like to smear the Maxwell's equation idea all over everything. And then once I heard that, I didn't want any part of any of it at all, because I was thinking of talking to those people because I wanted a mathematical analysis on their transmission structure. But the whole thing to me smells like the rebirth of Tom Bearden. And I may be wrong in my judgment. I have no material left, but I don't think there's much anything happening there. So now we hear this term Maxwell's equations all the time, and it seems to be something that's always stuffed in your face, whether you like it or not. And the physicists have this pathological endearment to the concept, but they're not Maxwell's equations. They're Heaviside's equations. And the physicists express their hatred of Heaviside, but they use all of his mathematics. So it turns out to be there really aren't any Maxwell's equations, and Heaviside and Hertz and Planck and others point out that Maxwell's work was very vague and incomprehensible, very broad. There was a lot of revolutionary ideas that grew out of it in ways that Maxwell himself would have never anticipated. The final seizure of the process was with Albert Einstein, and that was the final destruction of the science of electricity by the complete adulteration of Maxwell's equations. What's not known is the opposite side of the coin is Hermann von Helmholtz in Germany. Now, Helmholtz figured out a way to go back to Maxwell's work. There's 20 propositions in Maxwell's work, which means there can be 20 equations. He figured out the longitudinal component, but like his contemporaries, he made it so mathematically complex that nobody could really understand it. But this is what Tesla picked up on, and Tesla made it work. So there's a lot to Maxwell, but the problem is these theoretical mathematicians have taken the subject over, and they take delight in making it as complicated as possible. Every theory that has been developed with regards to trying to describe the ether and various electrical relationships have all been in conflict. None of them there's any level of agreement. Nothing has been figured out. And if it wasn't for Heaviside, Kennelly, and Steinmetz, we'd still be using candles, and Maxwell's equations or theories would just be something like a religious artifact. It's rather remarkable how all this came about. And today, nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares. So it's meaningless. The credo of America is, I want a new drug now. That's all there is. So basically, the way I look at this, all this writing I'm doing is just to keep me going nuts while I sit in the front seat of my car. But about 0.00001% of the Earth's population is actually interested in it, and I get all kinds of mail mostly from lay people, and it's nice to be able to communicate and explain stuff. There's one or two physics mathematicians that I interact with, but they won't cooperate. They fight it, but they seem to have some kind of curiosity anyway. So that's helpful, and if they send me interesting books, which either, I can say are garbage or helpful, the one I got on Heinrich Hertz's book was very helpful. So it's kind of a strange situation, but at any rate, I make it work, and I will continue to produce this material until I end up in the grave.
Okay. Yeah. So for anybody on the call, we will open up for questions. Just hang tight for a moment. When Eric is mentioning that AM stations operate in this longitudinal mode, I'd recommend everybody go to crystalradioinitiative.com. That's crystalradioinitiative.com, and that presentation right there is where Eric gives a very, very simple whiteboard walkthrough on exactly how that whole concept works, where it's like a Tesla-style crystal radio setup. Do you want to give like a real, just kind of a brief overview of the Crystal Radio Initiative and how it relates to that AM station transmitting in that mode?
Yeah, what that was a basic formulation for how to calculate the number turns and those kind of things with the coil to make it work in the Tesla mode. And the objective was to see how much power, in other words, electrical energy, you could extract from a local AM station through that longitudinal mode. And a number of people were successful in acquiring a significant, not a large quantity, but a significant quantity of electrical energy through this longitudinal mode, the Tesla wireless mode, to light small lights and run small motors and what have you. And then, of course, these things also can be designed for transmitting, which a few hams I know, as I've already described, are starting to apply these to what's called the 160-meter band. That's adjacent to the AM broadcast band. It's 1.8 to 2.0 megacycles per second, so it's still in the medium wave band. And it's always been kind of a dilemma for hams because the wavelengths are so large. Most hams can't afford to put up 200-foot towers and that kind of stuff. So using this other methodology of Tesla, which can be contributed to the works of Helmholtz, it is possible to engage in long-distance communications with no aerial structure whatsoever. At this point, though, you're not really out of the soup yet, because even though this thing eliminates the need for the AM radio tower, you still need the AM radio station ground system, which is rather giant and is out of reach of most people. But some people have deep wells with metallic casings, and that's helping them do this. And it's the Helmholtz method of transmission in general is starting to take off in the amateur bands, usually with what are called loop antennas. And they seem to be quite effective, even though they're not really electromagnetic. And the advantage, again, is they don't take up a lot of room. They can operate in a small space, but the electrical forces are rather severe, and that usually means that you have to kind of really know what you're doing to make these things.
Okay. Let's see. Anything else you want to touch on before we open up for questions?
I think that pretty much covers everything. Okay.
So let's see. Somebody's been wanting to ask a question for a while here. If your number ends in 1406, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead and say your name, where you're from, and go ahead and ask your question. Give me a second here. Okay, are you there? Your phone number ends in 1406?
Yes. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay. Hi, Eric. Two statements and then a question. I wanted to thank you because
what is your name and where you're from?
I'm sorry, Stephen Mossbrooks, and I'm from Jacksonville, Florida.
Okay. Hi, Steve.
Okay. Hi. So the two statements are, first, I just want to thank you because, Maxwell and Tesla, like I study the greats and I do science fiction writing for somebody else, but they're really writing science fiction about science fact, and it's given me a lot of insight, and they talk about you endlessly, and I'm starting to get it, but I just write for them. You know what I'm saying? So I'm starting to get it. But so the statement is a thanks because Tesla invented AC, but in the end it'll end up being DC. That occasionally is AC in my mind. But you designed everything, and I now work for a local municipality that I can't mention because it's a public call. But I'm putting Tesla's books out on Monday so that others start to get the hint. But they pride themselves on innovation. So it was just that was the first statement, just a thanks. The second statement is I personally pledge 5% of my gross earnings, since it's tax deductible, to you for the rest of your life, whether you're a nonprofit or not. And I wanted it to be on public record. And on top of it, I've talked to the author already, and he insisted on this, that you get 10% of the book sales because there's several that he's writing and you're in them. So it's exciting for me to meet you, and I want you to know that no matter what you do, I personally earn $104,000 a year, and that translates into $5,200 spread across 12 months. I know the exact figure, but I won't tell you. But I'm going to get my next check in 2 weeks, and I'm sending 5% of it to you for the rest of my life, and that's how thankful I am. Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Anything that comes out of say my consortium group, and it's a company you won't see yet, but it's called Planet Winds Energy Solutions, and they've also pledged 5% of their profits to your organization, and they don't care if you're doing anything, and I hope you get to enjoy retirement. But if we can keep you going, I hope this serves as an inspiration to others on this call that we've got to, your life should be better than it is, and you just don't know how to market products to them because they don't even know what they're buying from you, and I think I can help you with that. I'm personally building a water-powered tiny home to retire early, and I'm within 5 years of retirement, but I'm going to make more out of retirement or in retirement than working my job now. It's obvious. But I pledge it to you. So here's the question. The question is if an electromagnet is turned on with electricity, what happens if you can turn off the field of a permanent magnet? And you don't have to answer that now, but I want you to think about that because I think he knows how to do it.
Okay, I'm not quite certain. You're saying to make a permanent magnet lose its magnetism?
No. Make a permanent magnet that doesn't have a north and a south pole. It's just a flow, and you can siphon off of it, and I'll explain it to you outside of it. But he'd be better. I say he, but it could just as easily be a she. I messed up pronouns.
What you'd have to do is you'd have to write me with a description.
Yeah, he will, or they will. You know what I'm saying? But I just wanted. That's it. So that was the question, and I thank you for your time.
Okay. Well, thank you.
You're welcome. I'd like to make you dinner sometime.
All right. Well, that's very generous of you, Stephen. For anybody who is able to donate to EPD Labs to help further Eric's work, at ericpdollard.com, there's two ways to do it. In the right column, there is a PayPal button if you want to donate online. Otherwise, there's an EPD address in Spokane, Washington, where you can send checks or money orders and make them payable to EPD Laboratories, Inc., and as soon as I get those, I forward those down to the bank in Nevada, and that money goes to the projects. The priority money goes to just paying bills for the building. The building is paid off, but I'm talking about phone, electric, insurance, any utilities, and that kind of stuff is a priority. and then anything above that goes to projects or books that Eric needs for reference material and so forth. And so again, ericpdollar.com. You can donate by PayPal with the button in the right column, or you can send check or money orders to the EPD address in Spokane, Washington. So again, thank you, Stephen. I did get your email, so if you need any help communicating anything to Eric besides the Lone Pine address, please let me know.
Hello?
Okay. Just a second. Okay, that Rand Clifford.
Rand Clifford here. Thank you, Aaron, for providing this opportunity. I'd like to talk to Eric a little bit about some things.
Yeah, so...
I've been having Aaron?
Yeah, go ahead. So do you want to mention, that you do write articles on some of these topics? I think, what is it? Is it veteranstoday.com?
Oh, well,
is that one of the main?
Go all over the world, actually. And that's what I wanted to talk about. Let me put it this, I've been having problems with my phone cutting out and stuff. I'm not sure what that's about. You're in Spokane, right?
Yeah, no, you're coming through loud and clear. I saw you drop in and out a few times.
They keep, it just stops, but I heard most of the introduction and everything, and no conspiracy theory, quote-unquote, stuff here. I just want to tell him a few things, and I was wondering about, have you ever tried GoFundMe for Eric? I can't imagine a man that would deserve it more.
Yeah, we've done some Indiegogo campaigns in the past. It's probably raised a little over $50,000 total. Most of that went into the building originally, and had paid for quite a few other expenses. And so we have done that. What we need before we start raising any specific amount of money is we really need a contractor to go out and give an accurate estimate on the terminal building that needs to be built right at the access of the mine where the 3 seismographs are, and a few other things. And so once we have those numbers, we can probably break it down in different phases, phase 1, 2, 3, whatever the priority sequence is for each part of the project, and, raise those chunks of the money. But besides those, with your reach and your articles through Veterans Today and some of these other places, if there's any way to help get the word out,
Yeah, quite a few other places. Veterans Today is a primary. I send them first, and they publish them right away, but they're picked up all over the world. I just did one 5 weeks ago that went into videos and everything, translated into 5 other languages. I got contacts from Lebanon for Arabic. Can I please translate your superb article into Arabic? Go for it, man. Dr. Khoury, banking news. That was about central bank, Federal Reserve, and Trump stuff, but that was probably the biggest one. But other than that, I've done a couple series on Nikola Tesla. I have to call him that because of course, this is not you wouldn't, but a lot of people, if you mention Tesla now, they think cars, battery fires, Elon Musk, that kind of stuff. So they've been well programmed, but badly programmed, if you want my opinion.
So you have, so with the readers of your articles on all these websites online, you've seen comments that people do know who Eric is and they're supportive of his work?
Yeah. You got my email, and that was startling because I quote him quite a bit. The main one is about Tesla scared the central bankers senseless because they knew that free energy would mean complete loss of control over the people. And that one, I think, is probably the most popular. I mean, I've told his story. I know quite a lot about Eric, actually. I've read a lot, and I've been on his site a lot. And fantastic man. He's incredible. But I think he might be surprised if he knew how many people really know about him. Because that was the main thing that I would get is, glad to see Eric Dollard mentioned here, and all this stuff. And wow, from all over the English-speaking world, shall we say. They went everywhere. I think I did 3 series of 3 articles, and then some other ones in between. And I've talked a lot about Eric, written a lot about Eric, and he really, I think he might be a lot more famous than he thinks.
Well, he's on the line. Can you hear okay, Eric?
Yeah, I can hear okay.
Okay.
Hello,
so,
Eric.
Rand, do you have any questions specific to Eric, or that Eric might be able to answer? Or go for it.
Yeah, I do, but I just wanted to say that it's an honor, Eric. I'm a novelist in Spokane. I'm probably talking to you from about 2 or 3 miles away from Aaron at this time. And I'm a novelist primarily. So one thing that really fascinates me about you is you would be a perfect character. Such genius, electromagnetic technicality, everything, but it's all wrapped in swashbuckler. Now that's a perfect character, and I haven't, done anything like that. But I have written a lot of articles about Tesla and some about Victor Schauberger, and that's what I wanted to ask you about. But it's astounding how many people from other English-speaking countries and our country write back, and the general theme is that I'm so glad to see Eric Dollard mentioned here, and they'll have their little tidbits and everything, but there's a lot of them, Eric. I think there's a huge, shall we say, invisible following for Eric Dollard.
Well, that's the silent majority.
You better believe. See, you're just perfect, man. It's not just your technical. I've read a lot of your stuff, and you have you've got genius in a number of ways, and I can't wish you better. I understand what's happened and all this. I don't know, but what about Victor Schauberger? Well, the one thing you said, Tesla said, they'll never allow any free energy device to reach the market. I mean, that's just the bottom line, because it would be, as you indicated, loss of control of the people, and pretty much everything's been weaponized now. It's hard to think of something that is not a weapon of mass control. The media, for one thing, and I don't know, has the media ever mentioned Eric Dollard much? Surely not now, but ever? Did you ever get very much press?
Only when somebody needs to make trouble for me.
Yeah? But one thing that you were allowed to be insubordinate in the Navy, right? Wasn't that your branch?
Well, I wasn't insubordinate, but
yeah, well, kind of.
I don't know what the right word would be, but
yeah,
iconoclastic, and because of my basically, I graduated from high school as an electrical engineer, and actually in my senior year of high school, I did electrical engineering at the RCA transmission facility.
Right.
And initially, the Navy did not handle that well. They accused me of cheating because I could I could finish the test so fast, and I got
Yeah.
100%, but then it was figured out, and I'm kind of a fearless personality, and I don't let myself get pushed around, and I have the facts to stand behind me. So the Navy had a big problem, and I was the guy to figure it out, and I did a number of other things for the command that I was assigned to, and we all had a great time. But, of course, as soon as I was gone, everything, just went right back to where it was. Well, in fact, it doesn't even exist anymore because the Navy left the Philippines.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
But we had a good relationship initially, but then I got transferred into a lousy situation, and the captain would not listen to the chiefs, and I was under a constant state of harassment, like I was back in a boot camp. So the Navy allowed me to quit. So
really?
Yeah, so I was, you're not allowed to do that when you enlist. You're not allowed to quit. I was allowed to quit. I had to get back to RCA. They needed me really bad. Everything was falling apart. And
yeah. And you fixed it.
I got there a little too late.
And you repaired everything for them, but swashbuckler, I think that's my best term for you.
Well, as one of my friends said, I look like somebody either crawled out of a mine or crawled out of the whole deck of a ship that you would see in the John Wayne movies.
Oh,
I actually took that as a compliment.
Yeah, I suppose you would, but, to have such technical electromagnetic brilliance, all the Tesla, that's another thing I wanted to talk about that really got hot with a lot of people is, correct me if I'm wrong, that officially you're the only person that was able to actually build a Tesla coil with the staccato DC input and no current and created the capture of ether. I saw that video of yours that, and it seems I can't find it anymore, but I did see it. And
there was a presentation I gave to the U.S. Psychotronics Association.
Yeah?
That, gave the mathematical theory for rendering the so-called quaternion system of mathematics totally algebraic. That was a massive effort. It took me years. That was one of the projects I worked on when I was totally feral.
Yeah?
And,
feral.
And then I had, at that point, I had been introduced to Josh Reynolds, the Reynolds oligarchy, tobacco and aluminum, who started funding my work. And so I duplicated, to the best of my ability, of one of Tesla's original demonstrations from the late 1800s.
Yeah.
The type of thing you're talking about. It's pulsed rather than continuous wave, and I am the only one that has ever duplicated the things that Tesla has done in vacuum tubes.
Yeah.
And
I didn't know about the
what the U.S. Psychotronics Association did was totally suppress it, and nobody, not even Aaron, or myself, can get a copy of it to this day. So this is what all these societies do. So basically, somebody paid me $1,000 to be my worst, which I would normally do for free, but $1,000 made it easier. And I went to one of these international Tesla societies where some of these people that I mentioned that they got their fingers into this thing down in Texas. I went in there with bare feet and sharpened teeth and just played hell with the whole thing and just did exactly what Jesus did. I just went into the Tesla Society, kicked the money changers tables over, and loudly declared, "Where is Nikola Tesla?"
Oh, God. You're too good, man. You're just a walking... you're a novelist dream. I haven't done any work like that before, but that's another thing I wanted to tell you about because I get so many comments from a lot of them come from France and Germany and, other Canada, the United States especially. And they always ask me, a lot of them ask me the question, why doesn't Eric reproduce Tesla's work? And
there's an answer. There's a good answer. There's a good answer to that. Who's going to?
Yeah, you already answered it in that quote I said a little bit ago. Go ahead. I'm sorry. I'm just excited to be talking to a man like you. God.
Yeah, I mean, I got the building, and I got the know-how. I've got most of the materials, but there's no money to turn this building into a laboratory.
Yeah, but what I reply is the answer is in that quote about the central bankers of free power losing control of the people. That's
actually kind of more of an auxiliary situation.
Yeah,
there is free power. It's called solar.
Well, yeah, certainly.
But the thing is that utility companies tend to be uncooperative about your solar installation in relation to their service to your house, and the infection is so rampant in this country now, which I think anybody with a rational mind can see that the situation has gone hyperbolic. It's beyond comprehension. Even these talk show people that like to revel in that kind of filth, they're openly stating that they're absolutely disgusted with it and they don't even want to talk about it anymore. And what these people do is now you're not allowed to have solar panels independently. You have to pay the power company or whatever. But the free energy is there with the solar. But there's a warning that I keep stating is there's a lot of complications involved because of the energy gluttonry. For example, nobody has a passenger car anymore. They have a 10-kiloton devil machine, particularly around where I live here.
Excellent.
About 28 feet long and about 9 feet high, and it's empty as the head of the owner. And every year they get 5% bigger. So now they want energy. Okay, well, in my recent studies going through E.T. Whitaker's book on the history and theory of the ether and electricity, there was a mathematical proposition based on some discoveries in the late 19th century that indicated that the human species could get energy from the dynamic momentum of the Earth. Well, that was all fine when all people wanted was a 50-candle power lamp. But now, when you're driving around in a 10-kiloton beef monster and you've got 10 million people doing that, well, you take the momentum out of the Earth, what's the Earth's rotation going to do? How free is free energy? Another thing that's been brought to my attention is I know somebody that I met recently that wants to build one of these cryptocurrency computer centers. Well, these things, I never knew this, but they use billions of watts. Well, there's a big difference between electrical technology and electronics technology. Electrical technology is the energy is usually transformed from one state to another. An automobile is an example. The potential energy of the fuel is turned into the translatory and motional energy of the automobile, and the waste is, the friction of the wind or whatever, but most of it is translational. In electronics, every iota of energy is all turned into heat. Now, what if we get this computer technology and we have all these giant billion-watt computer centers all over the place? Well, I think that would give some credence to global warming. So energy is not a good idea. And the Tesla wireless transmission system operating with today's energy demand would most likely cause massive earthquakes. So there's a balance to be had here that's not normally paid attention to, and I don't think people want to hear it.
Let's see. If your number is ending in 7615, go ahead and say your name, where you're from, and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, Mr. Dollard. My name is Justin Perez. I'm from Jersey City, New Jersey. How are you doing?
Okay.
Can you hear me well?
Yeah, you're coming in fine.
All right. First of all, I just want to go over a little about myself. I'm 25 years old. I actually just graduated from my community college with an associate's degree in electronics engineering. And basically, I have just been, just questioning a lot of things in my classes, and then I stumbled upon a lot of things on the internet. And as we both know, there's a lot of bull crap on there, but I do believe I found some reliable sources, such as yourself. I actually purchased your book, the Lone Pines edition, A Common Language of Electrical Engineering, and I basically have just been doing a lot of research on my notes everywhere. All right, so I just want to ask you a couple questions, if that's okay.
Okay.
So basically, my first question to you would be, where is I just had here? All right, so what would you consider a particle then? Like, as obviously what we have today in our science, but like, what would you consider a particle?
Well, I don't commit myself to that. All I can really do is refer you to J.J. Thompson's book, Electricity and Matter.
Okay, I do have a PDF file of that, so I'll definitely check that out. My other question would be, and I noticed that you mentioned these a lot in your books and also in the things on YouTube. You mentioned, what is an electron, a proton, and a neutron? Unless that's the same thing.
Yeah, it's best to go back to J.J. Thompson's theories on that.
All right. Now,
I don't make any commitment to the definition of particles, because that's an abstraction that it has no physical proof, and I don't involve it in any of my work.
No, because I know obviously
I deal strictly with the fields and not the matter end of it. I'm on the ether side, not the matter side.
Exactly, and obviously J.J. Thompson considers it some type of end line of the lines of force that you said that you heard.
Yeah,
like, how can we recreate that experiment?
A terminal situation, and Thompson gives his notions on, what this thing would be, but Thompson is he's very careful not to commit himself to any specific idea, because those would just be theories. He's more after, a scientific fact rather than a theory. So
I'll just have to read the book.
His factual interpretations of, the charge to mass ratio and the things that he determined, and then in the post-Einstein years, even though he is credited with his discovery, Thomson viciously rejected the Lorentz notion of the electron and actually sneered at it in public.
Yeah, actually, I do have notes about that. Yeah, I actually was looking at some notes about that. See, in 1904, that I forgot the man's name. I think it was Abraham. Basically said that the Lorentz contraction of electrons requires a non-electromagnetic force to ensure that the electron's stability. This was unacceptable to him as a proponent of the electronic magnetic Reverd's view. Lorentz's system of hypothesis is incomplete as long as a consistent explanation is missing as to how these forces and potentials act together on the electron, and thus does not satisfy the relativity principle. So, like, obviously, I don't understand how can we go this long with this relativity idea if, like, all these guys who created our worldview or electrical grid, said it's bullcrap.
Like I pointed out, is all the theories of that era up until the final cessation of natural philosophy and the science of electricity with Albert Einstein, and all theories following Albert Einstein in their realm, are all conflicting, and nothing leads to an absolute result.
Exactly. So this is exactly why I
spent 2 months going through all these books, trying to get the whereabouts of this whole thing, and trying to get something concrete to grab onto, and there isn't anything. There's nothing.
I'll take your word for it then. I'm not even going to get into it, because I found you, and there's another man I think you actually met. His name is Ken Wheeler. He also talks about that counter space as ground. What is your idea of that?
I'm not totally familiar with everything that he's doing, but I've heard about a few things. Somebody showed me something he wrote about Thomson and how to view this stuff that was very good. I was quite impressed by how he has managed to reawaken those ideas, but we don't really interact too much. so I don't know exactly. I can't place any judgment on where he's at or what he's doing. But,
gotcha.
but I do get letters from people that that he mentions my work and his work. And
he praises you.
Together. Yeah.
Yeah. So what would you consider counter space then? That was actually another question of mine. Because is that literally when we?
Well,
go
think,
ahead.
Rather than getting into all these detailed questions, it'd probably be best if you went to the presentations that relate to that. The one that's for free, that the Tesla Society tried to suppress, but a friend of mine managed to get it out on YouTube, goes by all kinds of titles. The slang title is "Explosion at the Shipyard." The definite title is supposed to be "The History and Theory of Electricity." So
yeah, I have tons of notes on that. I've been reading that and studying that almost once
you'd be
now.
better off there rather than me just pulling something off the top of my head.
Gotcha. Well, other than that, sir, I obviously just wanted to thank you. You don't know how many hours and days and almost years now. I have a hard time focusing, and I waste my time and a lot of bull crap and money. I definitely want to start, sending some money over your way and hopefully even talking to you and bouncing some ideas off you. I'm just trying to study these things, and I just need some direction, man.
Well, you can write me at Lone Pine, unless it's absolutely absurd. I always write everybody back. It might take about a month, but everybody gets written back. That's the best way to do it.
Yeah.
I can't
thanks
have
a lot,
everybody
man.
calling here, or I won't be able to use the phone. But the writing thing is the best.
Of course, but like I said, man, you're amazing. Thank you so much. And you mentioned something, and I felt that in the heart, man. You're not doing this for nothing, man. You're really not. There's people like me studying this. I plan on doing something with this. I want to change things, and I'm not doing it for money. I don't like to see humanity this way, and I'm sure you don't either. So thank you.
Right. Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay, and Justin, on Eric's website, ericpdollard.com, there's that free videos link in the main menu bar, and if you just mouse over it, there's a little pop-up menu that comes up. And the first one is the history and theory of electricity. And if you click that, that's the video presentation Eric is referring to from the Old Tesla Society. It's 3 hours and 24 minutes long.
Yeah. Like I said, I've been studying, but
let me remark on that's based on the original edition, not the 3-volume edition, but the original edition of a book by E.T. Whittaker, a famous mathematician, called The History and Theories of the Ether and Electricity. And his contemporaries did not like it at all. And he was thought to be a turncoat for presenting this material, in a time in which relativity was in its ascendance. But there's a lot of things left out, and it does tend to get very mathematical, but I think that is the best book you can find on the history of electrical science from Descartes up to modern day, 20th century. Well, now we're in the 21st, but the 20th century concepts of electricity. That book is thorough and with a lot of references.
My thing is, I'm just trying to figure out how can I get this to the most basic form of circuitry just to prove that this thing, is working. Like, this is the truth.
Well, you're not dealing with circuits now. You're dealing with fields. And this is where the electronics people have their problems.
Oh, yeah. I wanted to ask you about that.
So I would recommend Heaviside's book, Electromagnetic Theory, even though 90% of it is incomprehensible mathematics. Heaviside will all of a sudden lapse into English. And he's very amusing and interesting to read, and jabs all the people that deserve it. And,
I think you're pretty funny.
And I'm kind of how would you say, a regeneration of Heaviside. My philosophy is nothing is gained by being nice.
No, that's my type of humor. I have the same type of personality. It's funny.
So that would be helpful also.
Yeah, but that was my other question.
Basically, what you're going to need if you're going to go anywhere in this, you're going to have to get yourself pretty grounded in basic mathematics. Very adept at algebra and basic, not extensive calculus, just basic calculus, and then there is a whole litany of books, that I've gone
like
through.
the EM boundary thing that you were talking about?
Well, it's, you're going to have to, I can't spend that much time on the phone on individual subjects, but I'm just giving you're going to have to go do this on your own, and then you can write me, if you want answers to questions. So,
all right, I will do that. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Justin.
No problem. Thank you.
Okay, let's see. Let's see, Steve Young, I'm going to unmute you here. Hold on a second. Okay, go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, guys. Wow, kind of a hard act to follow there. I'm a ham operator, and I kind of met Eric's work by accident. Eric, I have a question. On the advanced seismic warning system, nobody has been able to detect the Earth signals hours before the Earth starts moving. Can you describe how far in advance some of these signals can be detected and what they sound like?
Okay, well, it's about 48 hours to maybe 18 hours beforehand. And what it is there's a natural frequency to the Earth at around 18 kilocycles. And there's always pulses of this, very powerful pulses inside the Earth, usually induced by lightning strikes. And they sound like chirps because any of these dispersive signals, they don't really have one frequency. They start from a high frequency and they go to a low frequency, so it's a sweep. Steve McGreevy has captured a lot of these sounds, and he has them on his Aurora Chorus website to get an idea of what these sounds are like. He gets them out of the magnetic field of the Aurora Borealis, but I'm getting it electrostatically out of the inside of the Earth. So what happens is when things start to build up, those chirps become much more coherent rather than clicky-type chirps. They start to sound more like whistles. And the frequency of this drops, and the amplitude rises power-wise about 30 decibels. That's about 1,000 times stronger. And it finally coalesces into some kind of tone or shriek. And at that point, you got 12 hours.
Wow.
Now, the Japan earthquake, the famous recent Japan earthquake was interesting in that it was out of range of my underground receiving, but as far as the overground element of it went, the portion that's between the surface of the Earth and the ionosphere, 48 hours beforehand, the overground antenna chart recorder went all the way up to 100%. There was a massive noise storm. There wasn't anything particularly coherent about the overground, and there never is. Manifests itself as noise. So essentially, you can just use an AM radio tuned to the bottom of the band to warn you of an impending earthquake, providing that you can distinguish it from the sounds that tornadoes and hurricanes make. Hurricanes make noises very similar to earthquakes. So then there was a certain amount of time for the mechanical shock wave of the first earthquake to propagate to landers, and because all the chart recorders are all on a common shaft and running side by side, then that presented itself, like 15 minutes or something like that after the first earthquake. But the noise continued, and the noise persisted up until the main event, and then it dissipated. So anybody in Japan, because of digital, you can't really do these things anymore because switchboard operators do not have contact with electrodynamic instruments, and there's no more open wire telephone lines, so telephone operators can't hear the sounds. But I would imagine there's probably loads of computer glitches, power line transients, communications complications, problems with radio reception that would have presented themselves very strongly 12 hours before the event. That would be almost guaranteed.
Well, that's amazing. So if you could have had a couple of these systems set up you would probably been able to have heard the recent earthquake in Alaska many hours before it started actually moving.
Yeah, there could have been a noise storm, and actually if I would have been living in my car at Lone Pine rather than being here in the building where I can't pick anything up, I probably would have caught it because I have a pretty extensive radio frequency monitoring system in the car. So like when people that know what the car looks like, will know what I'm talking about. It looks like an insect because it has these antennae on it, which are actually proportioned to the architecture of the car. So they don't look like antennas, they look like the car. And people ask me, well, what are those antennas for? I give them all kinds of different answers depending upon the answer that they deserve. But if it's somebody that needs to get an answer that isn't a prank, I tell them that basically my car is like an insect in that it senses its electromagnetic and electrostatic environment. And when I get out into the bushes and I'm in like in Lone Pine, I'm in a city of Los Angeles water and power utility jurisdiction, and they're all Delta, so there's absolutely no interference. Very, very quiet there. That's really the place where the big one, as far as like another Landers facility, should be in Owens Valley for a number of reasons. But at any rate, so I receive ELF and low frequency, medium frequency, high frequency, and very high frequency simultaneously, and I have all these speakers in the car picking up not so much man-made signals, but earth-made signals, and it's a very interesting type of stereo. And it's quite enjoyable at sunset to sit there in the car and listen to all this stuff come to life. Typically, the electrical event preceding an earthquake presents itself at sunset. All of a sudden, everything usually starts to go nuts at sunset. If it does it during daylight hours, it's going to be something really severe, like the Japan earthquake. But in general, they start at sunset. And if you're like within 50 or 100 miles of where the earthquake's going to occur, all you really need to do is just get an AM radio that's tweaked a little bit so you can go down to about 500 kilocycles and just leave the thing on in the background, and the noise will be outrageous just before the event. It'll be this frying hiss, steady, loud, frying hiss without any real rhythm to it. It just blazes. The Landers earthquake, I was at its sister facility in Bolinas at the time, and the night before, my friends used to come by around the campfire and what have you. It was an outdoor constructed facility, and couldn't tune any shortwave signals in or anything. The noise was outrageous. Couldn't receive at all. And so I turned everything off, and it was sad. And the town was permeated by this bizarre silence. Nothing moved. And my friend turned around, looked at me, and goes, God, I hope nothing bad's going to happen. Then my car in the morning with the AM radio on, the KNX in L.A., and then I hear the earthquake hit. And the epicenter was 5 miles away from where Walt and I were beginning to build this facility, and we had the simple field telephone wire and ground rod configuration to receive out of the earth. And when I was finally able to reestablish communications with the area, that's when I was informed of this process, because Walt had the speakers on all over the property 24 hours a day with this signal going full blast out of the earth. It kept evil spirits away. Pretty good. You didn't have to lock the doors there. It terrified people so bad. And he said that this process that I just described had presented itself, and it finally coalesced into what he described as a shriek. And then I got confirmation from an electronics engineer who was a very close friend of his, who he managed to get out there the day before the event. And that christened the project that we're talking about now.
Well, this is incredible, Mr. Dollar, that you've been able to work all these years, and you're the only one. You're the only one around that's actually doing a preemptive type of detection. And this is incredibly important.
There's actually I'm not the only one. There is a method that was developed by, there's a group of people I know that used to work on the SETI project. That was the deep space receiving, looking for intelligence signals.
Yeah.
And they all kind of gravitated around Stanford University and NASA Ames research facility. And I know these guys. Some of them I've just talked to briefly. Others are very good friends of mine. There's a guy named Tony Fraser Smith, and he operated the radio sciences department at Stanford University, and he found that the Earth's magnetic field became very abruptly shifted a significant time before the Loma Prieta earthquake, which was in that area, and he presented his information and got, slapped down and then went into denial, won't talk about it anymore. Well, there's a group of people that call themselves quake finders, and they've taken his magnetometer method and have implemented it, from my understanding, around Chile, which is a severe earthquake area, and they have determined that this magnetic shift starts about 3 months before the event, which is a good primary warning, but the thing is, it doesn't do right before the event. So the Alexanderson method that I developed and the magnetometer method that they developed should be used in tandem. Now, on top of this, and this is what's remarkable, is there's a scientist that I met and engaged in conversation with for about 2 days here in Nevada. He came from Ames, came here to talk to me in Nevada, and his name is Friedemann Freude. He has developed a very solid and remarkable theoretical basis for how all this comes about that was very accurately in tune with the observation at landers, like all the color TVs were magnetized in the town of Yucca Valley, magnetized beyond repair. He pointed out, that these earth currents and the semiconductor process has got this whole thing worked out. He can't get his papers published, and his laboratory has just been closed down. His method that he's developed is the molecular dissociation method. There starts to be various ions, gaseous ions, that start to exude from the Earth right before the event. Unlike my system, which doesn't tend to operate unless it's going to be a major event, his system also works for minor events. So here's 3 people that have all talked to each other and have all come up with one methodology or another, and have gotten, workable results with active seismic processes. Why isn't this happening? The utility companies want it. Why isn't it happening? I'll tell you why it isn't happening. It's this totalitarian, Einsteinian view of the universe that will not tolerate anything that steps out of Einstein's theory or can't be defined by Maxwell's equations.
Yeah, there's a lot of that going on, a super bunch of that going on. But I wanted to thank you for all the work that you're doing, and I can't wait to hear the results of that new antenna that you guys are building when you get it on the air. And thank you so much, Mr. Dollar, for really everything that you're doing. You're just, sooner or later all this is going to pay off. Thank you very much.
Okay, you're welcome.
Thanks, Steve. Okay, let's see. It's 1:37, so we're almost an hour, 40 minutes into this. We'll take a few more questions and wrap it up. We can just be real brief with the questions. Let's see. If your number is ending in 6035, I'm going to unmute you. Go ahead and say your name, where you're from, and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Eric Swartman from Kentucky, and I just had a quick question about the retrofitted Y connection with the power grid. Does that fall under Ilya Priggen's open thermodynamic theory, and could it possibly be coupled to the ionosphere in some kind of way where it would be a good thing instead of a bad thing?
Well, I'm not quite certain what you're asking, but Y connection is a double Y connection of transformers is bad news all the way around. Textbooks tell you not to do it. Other textbooks earlier back, like Steinmetz's books, don't even mention that connection because it was understood that it causes severe harmonic distortion and opens you up to ionospheric transients, telluric transients, nuclear EMP transients, lightning strikes, and line the ground faults and brings them all right into your household.
Hmm. So that couldn't be considered like an open thermodynamic system where you could draw energy from those natural phenomenon instead of just interference?
Yeah, what you can do is you can, with a set of transformers, you can extract the zero sequence component of the power coming into your building, if it's three-phase, and get some quantity of energy, theoretically. I want to do that experiment here. If I could ever get a laboratory, I would be putting this stuff out because I've got a ground system here that's, I got two water tanks outside buried in the ground, 15,000 gallon and 35,000 gallons. So I got a way to draw that zero sequence component off of the power company neutral, and the laboratory objective would be to monitor that continuously and record what these things are that are coming down the line. And it is conceivably possible to derive some quantity of energy from it, but if you were deriving some quantity of energy off of it, indicate that there's probably a major fault in the system somewhere. Otherwise, it's just going to be random transients.
Okay, thank you, sir. You're my favorite maverick magneto-electrodynamicist.
Okay, thank you.
Cute. All right, thanks, Eric. Let's see. If your number is ending in 6645, I'm unmuting you. Go ahead and say your name, where you're from, and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, my name is Roger Shearer. I'm in Orlando, Florida, and I was trained as an electronic engineer after being a musician for several years, and I've worked in recording studios and repaired amps and consoles and lighting dimmers and all kinds of other stuff. I've recently been watching Suspicious Observers, and they've also got a site, quakewatch.net, and they have been correlating earthquakes with coronal holes in the sun, and when the stream reaches Earth, they have said that there's more possibility of earthquakes taking place, and
well, that just happened recently. So right at the time,
they've been doing this since
right at the time of the Alaskan earthquake, the recent one, when I got the solar terrestrial report off of the radio in my car. They've been giving impending magnetic storm warnings, which means that there is an event like this active on the sun right now.
Yes, and in fact, he broadcast.
I actually have charted. I think the chart's on my website somewhere. I don't know how you would find it, but there's a long chart, and it shows three to four rotations of the sun, and every time the solar flux reached the maximum in those rotations, there was a major historic earthquake. Haiti and other ones. So there's a very direct connection between this longitudinal magnetic induction from the sun and earthquakes, which makes sense because when the Earth is impinged upon by this longitudinal magnetic induction, the Earth starts to wobble on its orbit, and then that is going to mechanically, cause things to move. And then there's a little understood reality that modernistic physics has promoted this misunderstanding, is you cannot separate current from magnetism or the forces involved. They're all one of the same thing. They are inseparable. So if there's any magnetism on the Earth, it's because there's current inside the Earth, and there's literal rivers of this current. And these rivers align themselves with the seismic fault lines, and current and magnetism causes force in the relation between the two of them. So electrically, longitudinal magnetism from the sun, or you might want to say magnetically, can also cause earthquakes regardless of any mechanical considerations.
Yeah, I've been watching this for several months now, and they seem to be they're claiming almost an 80% accuracy rate, and I found it interesting. He broadcast about 4:30 in the morning, and he had just said, this was likely to happen, and son of a gun, Alaska went off. So anyway, I just wondered if you were aware of this QuakeWatch.net. And
I don't engage in the internet, so unless someone get hard copy, I don't really know what's going on. But I'd be interested to see what it is they're talking about. I don't think every corona hole is going to cause an earthquake, but I'd like to see what their statistics are, and then be able to view it from that standpoint and add that into the general information on the subject, help tie everything together.
Yeah. Well, perhaps I can print something out and send it to you.
Yeah, that would be great.
I'll try to do that. I can reach you through that general delivery, Lone Pine?
Yeah, that's the way to do it.
Okay. I will try to do that as soon as I can.
Okay, well, thank you.
And I've enjoyed your videos and lectures, and like I said, I'm trained as an electronics engineer, so I'm the standard model of the atom, and electrons and protons and neutrons and subatomic particles, and nobody seems to deal with fields. There's only the stuff you've been lecturing on, and there's another fella, what's his, Theoria Hypothesis.
That's Ken Wheeler.
I'm sorry?
That's Ken Wheeler.
Ken Wheeler?
Yes.
Yeah, he's not showing any of his magnetic videos anymore on his site, but he had some interesting concepts that seem to go along the same lines as you talk about.
Well, that's because he went back to J.J. Thomson.
Yeah.
J.J. Thomson and Nikola Tesla, they were the pioneers.
Yeah, I find Tesla fascinating. I've read a lot about him, but the concepts are they fall outside my current understanding, and I got to where I could kind of picture what was going on with electrons, and all of a sudden now I'm being hit with these new concepts that it's like being told that gravity is an electrical phenomena.
Well, you're being told that Santa Claus is not real, and now you got to deal with the hardcore reality of it. This is not new stuff. This is old stuff. We're going all the way back in this matter to the 18th century. What's taught today is everything 20th century and beyond, and anything before that is just simply buried.
Yeah, I'm was looking into the Michelson-Morley experiment, and there was another fellow, Miller, I believe, that redid that at a higher elevation and outside of, he wasn't surrounded by stone walls in a basement, and he had a higher resolution on his interferometer, and he was actually detecting something that was affecting the speed of light. And it seemed to come from a consistent direction, and so what, the luminiferous ether is an actual thing? It seems like it might be.
Well, that's what people
you're talking about
plenty of until all of a sudden a couple of people decided to change the idea and introduce their fantasies. So there's nothing new about the idea of the ether. It goes all the way back into primordial human history. It's just something that makes sense. But the physics doesn't make any sense. This quantum gobbledygook and relativity and all this stuff is just, all it is psychosis. And it keeps intensifying until now the current stuff is utter psychosis. And it'd be proper to say that physics is a mental disorder.
Yeah, it's the difference between theoretical and experimental and observational. So it's a new education for me, and I want to thank you very much. And I will get that earthquake stuff off to you as soon as I can.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Roger.
Bye. Thank
Yeah, for anybody who wants to look into Miller, who Roger was just mentioning, that's Dayton Miller, one of the most important players in those experiments. And you can go to Dr. James DeMayo's website called OrgonLab.org, OrgonLab.org. And Dr. James DeMayo has written extensively on Dayton Miller, and Dayton Miller is the one who did get the positive results with his interferometry experiments, and he was in correspondence with Einstein, and Einstein on record has said that if Miller's findings hold up, that his entire theory of relativity would fall like a house of cards, and the only thing that would remain would be the equivalence between gravity and inertia. And then when Einstein was, 70-something, getting towards the end of his life, he admitted that he had really pretty much no confidence that he was ever on the right track for any of his work. And I believe it was Dayton Miller's work with the interferometer that showed that. And, people still preach Einstein like the Holy Gospel, but they completely ignore Einstein's admission that Dayton Miller's work put his own work on a shaky path, and he had no confidence in it anymore. So
there's another interesting thing about Dayton Miller, because Robert Eman brought this up in one of our discussions. So I went to E.T. Whitaker's book, which has got everybody's name in it, and went to the index, and lo and behold, there was Dayton Miller's name in the index. And I went to that page, and it wasn't there. It had been edited out.
Okay.
So he must have been on this.
What's the name of the Whitaker book?
History and Theories of the Ether and Electricity. There's different versions, but I'm referencing the version that I have sitting here right now, which I think is the second version. But my presentation that I gave, that was the first version, and apparently that one's rather difficult to get, and I don't know how you can distinguish between the two.
Yeah,
It was
I'll definitely
from the
look.
Miller thing that maybe it was an accident. Sometimes that happens. But at any rate, there his name was in the index, and then I went to that page, expecting, okay, he was going to be in the line of events, and there wasn't anything. So that seemed a little suspicious to me. I have the same problem with the reprints of Dr. Laban's books, Evolution of Force and Evolution of Matter, which I recommend that everybody read. It's the most scathing criticism of all of this garbage that I've ever seen. And the same problem exists there. Is all of a sudden you really start to get interested in this concept of radioactivity and dissociation of matter, and then those 3 pages which describe that are gone. I don't think it was accidental. And I'm wondering, I've always accused Tesla of being an ass for not writing books, and but maybe I'm inaccurate about that. Maybe Tesla did like I did. I mean, I got thousands of pages of notebooks here and I make reference to them, and I just wonder if Tesla had the same thing, and then when his possessions got looted after his death, I just wonder, is there 20 volumes of Tesla notebooks that have his entire concept of electricity written down? We'll never know.
If you're calling from overseas and your number ends in 8205, you're already unmuted. Go ahead and say your name, where you're from, and go ahead and ask your question.
Hi, it's Gus from Australia. Eric, just want to say a big fan of your work, but I'll keep the question short. We're seeing the advent of 5G technology come to Australia. What are your thoughts on the safety and health aspects of 5G?
Any type of ultra-short waves are really not good for humans. I don't know enough about the power levels being used and the exact frequencies, but because of my Bell telephone and my Navy training in the 60s into the early 70s, that none of these power levels were regarded as safe for humans. Bell telephone standards were 500 microwatts, I believe, or maybe 50 microwatts, somewhere in that magnitude. And now we're talking about watts. I did experiments in high school with my Bell telephone equipment and found that the germinating characteristics of seeds were drastically altered with only 10 milliwatts of absorption of 30-centimeter wavelengths. In this case, it was 10-centimeter wavelengths. I think this 5G is 1-centimeter wavelength, so that makes it even more biologically active because the wavelength has to be roughly the size of what it's going to affect. So that's why I could take 100-meter wavelengths and pass them through my body and light up incandescent lamps on my metal watch band. When I was a kid, I wouldn't do it anymore. But if I did something like that at a 10-centimeter wavelength, I would be a barbecue dinner for the crows. The shorter the wavelength,
wow.
The more of the problem. All this stuff is just building up into cacophony. I got together with Steve McGreevy about 2 years ago to build what's called a crystal video detector in radar terminology, where there's no amplifiers. The point contact detector is hooked straight to the antenna electrically. He did that for the 10 to 30 centimeter wavelength band and connected it to one of his high-gain amplifiers that he sells for Earth signal listening, and then drove around in Owens Valley and then played the recording for me. And we were both quite horrified at what kind of environment we live in. There's no escape from this stuff. In fact, it's so strong that I was with Aaron once in Seattle, Washington. And it was a horribly rainy day. And when I got there, I couldn't use any of the radio equipment in my car because what was happening, and I summarized this from one of the residents in the household that we visited, that they were having all these problems with their Wi-Fi. There's so much of this UHF and SHF, super high frequency blazing through the air that in Seattle, when it rains, is the rusty metal contacts on car bodies and rain gutters and guy wires and cross-arm braces and telephone cable sheaths and all that. When they start to get wet, they were intermodulating all of the ultra-high frequency and above and causing beat frequencies, which made medium wave and short wave reception impossible. It was just a slush of intermodulation because of this cacophony of electromagnetic activity. I was kind of stunned that it's gotten that bad. I'd studied this stuff earlier when I had all the fancy NSA spectrum analyzers and those kind of things in the good old days, and that's when it was just beginning. And what was going on was already fairly startling and was probably instrumental in why our installation got bulldozed.
Wow. Hey, so another question. So if there is such a thing as bad electromagnetic fields for the human body, have you thought of any ways in which we can generate a counter field or a beneficial electromagnetic wave for the body that would probably mitigate some of the negative effects of what we're experiencing?
Well, there's people that are claiming to do that radionically, but I don't see the feasibility of that.
Okay.
The only thing you can do is just build yourself a screen room and make sure not one wire comes in or out of that's not thoroughly bypassed, just like they do in the secret facilities, so you can't listen to the secret telephone calls and what have you, like the stuff I worked on in the Navy, is you just build yourself a copper box and seal it tight.
Yeah. Okay, so like a Faraday cage, basically.
Well, now, Faraday cage is something different. That's another one of these misnomers. So Faraday cage lets all that stuff through. Faraday cage is one of the most grossly misused phrases in the electrical world. It's pure parrot. A Faraday screen is a shield that allows the electromagnetic to enter, but not the electrostatic.
Right.
But nobody remembers that anymore. In fact,
so this copper box, how would it be constructed and what's it connected to?
You just basically copper foil on all the walls and solder all the joints, and any wire that comes in and out has to go through a bypass filter.
Right. And is that grounded in any way, or is it just floating? Or?
It doesn't necessarily have to be grounded. It doesn't hurt. That takes the electrostatic out better, but it has to be continuous. There can't be any seams or breaks. It's really not. It's not a practical. If it's that bad, you need to move to another neighborhood. It'd be cheaper.
Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you for that.
There's what you could do. Is basically put reflectors and point them back at the antennas that are interfering with you, and to cause multipath and cause their systems not to work. But that would be regarded as an act of terrorism, so I don't suggest it.
No, correct. So we'll stay away from that.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for that.
Okay. Let's see. I think we can do one more question, and then we're going to have to wrap it up. Give me just 1 second here. I think, Justin, you have a question. I can't click it on the computer here, but if you can hit 4* to unmute yourself, go ahead and ask your question.
All right. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Hey, what's up? All right, so I want a quick question. Why is copper a conductor? Like, why does only copper do that? Is there any other material that has that same effect?
Yeah, aluminum, magnesium, silver, gold, iron. All of those are reflective to electromagnetic waves to one degree or another. Gold and silver have the best reflectivity. Copper, the next. Iron is pretty lossy. But so rather than reflecting, iron will end up soaking up a part of it and turning it into heat. Aluminum's pretty good, but aluminum is difficult to make leak-free connections with. Magnesium's very similar to aluminum. And then, of course, there's nickel and other things. But copper is the best compromise between cost and reflectivity. for electromagnetic waves, so that's what's usually employed. But aluminum is common. Like, you won't find copper microwave dishes. You'll find aluminum or steel with anodizing or some kind of plating on them or something to give you the activity that's necessary.
Now, in the video, The Origin of Energy Synthesis, I remember you were talking about these like dead zones and things of that nature. Now, you said that Tesla said that there was some type of gas that was like 50 times faster than the speed of light, and that he called it some type of cosmic rays. And like, what type of material captures that, or does that just penetrate everything?
I don't know. He never described it. That was one of Tesla's laws. He never described how he did things.
But would that be considered the ether, or?
Order. I can't make any speculation on that.
So what I mean is, like, would that be considered the ether or something greater, or we have no idea?
Yeah, I can't make any speculation. He doesn't say what he's talking about. He just says there's cosmic rays that go 50 times faster than the speed of light, and that's all you get. So,
now, what about this, like, ideas of different subject now of, like, crystals? Like, could you use a crystal as some type of capacitor?
Yeah, there's not much point in it.
Mm-hmm. No, there was this other guy that was really interesting. He found this, I don't know if you ever heard of him, Victor Grebnikov. Basically, that guy was like the insects that he found out that they had some type of ability where they called it cavernous structures effect, CSC. Basically, these bugs were able to have some type of anti-gravity effect with their wings, like the way they flap them around is basically causing some type of distortion in space. Like, have you ever heard about that, or?
Well, that's starting to get, I can't, that's all speculative stuff.
I see. Here's some guy in Russia. Like I said, this is all just
there's
stuff.
People, there's people that say everything, that they're abducted by aliens.
Yeah, we got to just stick to the facts, right?
All that it turns out to be is a big dummy load for your time and energy, and I don't really...
That's what I'm not trying to do. I want to waste my energy on stuff that's, going to be moving forward. Like, so for example, where would you say I start? You said electricity and matter. Where do I go from there?
Well, I mean, I don't know which way you want to go. I mean, if you just want to get into pure theory, or you want to know how to build things, or
basically up to wherever you leave it off.
Just go back to all the old books, everything before Einstein.
Okay.
A good introductory book on theoretical electrical engineering is called Impulses, Waves, and Discharges by.
Yep, I got that PDF.
Yeah.
And that's another thing, like you mentioned that before too.
Basic electronics technology or something like that is Navy electrical and electronics training manuals from the 50s.
It's funny. I was thinking about joining the Marine Corps.
Really practical stuff, that you can just build things and learn how to connect tubes. I mean, it's up to you. You just got to start hunting, just like I did.
Yeah,
unfortunately, all this
funny,
stuff pulled off the shelves of the library, so I don't know what you're going to do.
Do you feel like being in the Navy really helped you with that, though?
I already knew that stuff before I went in the Navy. The Navy isn't really the Navy anymore. Everything's gone to hell. You'll hate every minute of it. So stay away from all that stuff. I used to recommend, that young people join the Navy. Not anymore. It's not really the Navy anymore. The military is not our military. It's Hillary's military. I think this stuff is starting.
I think it goes even further to that into other countries, but
yeah. So they're just to weaponize the whole thing for their own.
Yeah, I trust me. I know all about it, but like you said,
at any rate, we've strayed too far off. I don't want to get into all this crazy stuff.
No, of course. I'm just trying to stick to the stuff that's going to help us,
So it's up to you. You're going to have to take it on yourself and find your path.
Thank you, sir. Really, thank you.
Okay, so if anybody, does want to support EPD Labs, Inc., the 501c3 nonprofit, you can go to ericpdollar.com, and again, in the right column, there is a PayPal button if you want to donate, if you're able to donate online, or if you want to send any kind of check or money order. There's a EPD Labs address in Spokane, Washington, and when I get that, I forward that down to the nonprofit account in Nevada, and anything helps at this time. The building is definitely paid off, but there's of course going to be ongoing bills for phone, electric, heat, insurance, property tax, that kind of thing. And then any donations above that will definitely go to projects or books or whatever Eric happens to be working on. And of course, the big funding that would be needed, we're going to have to break down some serious cost estimates on the projects and possibly start raising funds, in phases for different chunks of it. But we'll definitely post that in the newsletters and on the website when we have that figured out on exactly what path we're going to take. But in the meantime, Eric is dedicated to continuing the writing and drafting out the diagrams, and we'll continue to put those out on the page. Also, next July is going to be the 8th Annual Energy Science and Technology Conference, and that's going to be July 11th to the 15th. It's going to be a 5-day conference. Thursday is going to be focusing more on mind-body science technology. The Friday, Saturday, and Sunday will be the normal energy conference. And then there's going to be an optional Monday, which is going to focus on business. And so anybody who has any of their own inventions or projects that they want to get put into production, we're going to go over contract manufacturing. We're going to go over, marketing, branding, lead generation, different things like that. Because so many people are involved with different experiments and different projects and circuits that they want to get out there, but most people don't really have the background to know how to do that. And so that's why we're going to be adding on that extra day. And so, I don't even know if you're interested in doing a presentation at the next conference, Eric, but it's definitely open if you want to.
Yeah, time will tell, but they're kind of too much for me.
Yeah.
I think I got to take a break, but I never know what's going to happen. It all depends.
Yeah. And even if it was a short presentation, hour and a half, something like that, it doesn't have to be a full, 5-hour presentation for sure. That was, I think I put quite a few hours into just helping to do the PowerPoint and stuff, 100-something hours.
Yeah,
and so,
quite an
but
ordeal. That multiple coordinate system one took me 8 months to put together, and probably 2,000 pages of notes and 2,000 pages of book study. I think that was the most difficult and comprehensive presentation on electrical transmission theory that has ever been conceived. It's basically an entire college course on the subject of networks and applying that theory to longitudinal and transverse waves. I was rather proud of that one. And even though there's probably almost 800 equations and it was pure math, the entire audience stuck with it and seemed rather enthralled. So I didn't feel like I was wasting my time. And I learned a lot from it. It's a textbook alone on the subject, if it could ever, just the PowerPoint probably should be printed in a book at some point in time here because it's all the equations. I could use it as my own reference in the future to go back. So right now, a retired lineman here that helps out with stuff, and I just gave him a copy of the most recent one. He goes, well, I don't understand all that math and stuff. And at any rate, he said he got quite a bit out of it. And I told him what my aim was is last presentation was aimed for the technical ability level of typical linemen or something like that has a hands-on experience with electricity would find that regardless of the mathematics that presentation would be very understandable and applicable in practice.
Right. Okay. Any final words before we hang it up?
No, I think I'm, as the ham radio operators say, QRU.
Okay. Well, everybody, thanks for being on the call. And when we do another one, we'll definitely announce it out to the newsletters. Do you know kind of what your schedule is over the next couple months?
Oh, I have no idea. Depends on the weather and what have you. But, if something needs to happen, I can make it happen. So I will be, one place or another. So we'll see.
Okay. Well, when you want to do another call, just let me know, and we'll go ahead and get that scheduled. And till then, thanks, Eric, and we'll be in touch. And thanks, everybody, for being on the call.
Okay.
Thanks, Eric.
Later. Okay, bye.
Okay. Thanks. Yep, bye-bye.